webinar, you can always get the recording from us. You can either email me directly. You'll have my contact info at the end of this, or you can email us at our marketing department, and we'll be able to get the recording out to you. Next is that right now all of you are muted, and I'm the only one that can speak to the audience, and that's because of GoToWebinar and how the webinar is structured. During the presentation, if you have any questions or comments, there's a questions pane on the right-hand side in your GoToWebinar panel. You may have to click on a red arrow to pull it out, but you can type any questions in there, or if you have any comments you want to add, you can type those into the chat window as well. And the great thing about today is I have a few of my colleagues on the line as well that are, at the ready to field questions. And so we'll either answer those questions live and respond back to you from the questions pane, or I'll mention them back up at the end of the webinar, or we'll email you afterwards to follow up as well. Next is because this webinar deals with content that is up and coming in a future version. As you always have to give that disclaimer up front that the content is going to be forward-looking, and there's no guarantee that every single item that we mention in this webinar will be included in exactly the detail that we say it is. Yes, we have a very strong feeling that all these things will be there. But again, there's always that legal disclaimer to be had. And so we'll go ahead and dive right in here. So what we're going to cover is first off, we just did a little bit of an introduction, and we'll continue that, and then we'll dive into some of the improvements that have been added from a PowerPoint context. So we'll show some things, for example, like manufacturing improvements, like lattices and tray assembly for 3D printing. We'll go into the rendering improvements as well, and then we'll touch on a couple of improvements in drawing mode, and then finally the last two improvements have to do with the user experience, or really just the UI in general, I should say. And so again, you'll notice the webinar is titled "What's New in Creo 4," but really it's just a few items. This is by no means an exhaustive list of everything that's new in Creo 4. And part of the difficulty in creating this webinar was to figure out, how to condense all of the different, bells and whistles that are new into an hour-long webinar that's most applicable for, many different people that will be joining this webinar from many different backgrounds and many different, models that you're building inside of Creo. And so again, this is by no means an exhaustive list of everything that's new. This is just, a list of the major highlights and also the things that should be most applicable to almost everyone using Creo. And then finally, over at the software demonstration, typically whenever we do our webinars, we do a live demonstration. In this particular case, we switch things up, and we'll be showing you a recorded demo of Creo 4. So in this case, we'll be playing a recorded video of Creo 4 being used and showing you some of those different enhancements. A little bit more by the way of introduction. We are Boundary Systems. We are a technology leader in our field of product development consulting. We are a major PTC reseller, and we also have many other software solutions to help you improve and get the greater levels of success. We primarily deal with product lifecycle and CAD data management, also CAD design and consulting. We also do a lot of simulation as well, and so really anywhere you are in the product development landscape, we have the expertise to help you reach higher levels of success. And this is just a little bit about me. My name is Shaish Bora. I basically just spent, I don't know, about 6 years getting 3 degrees from 4 different schools. And after that, I got tired and started working. I've been working here at Boundary, and I've loved every minute of it so far. I've really loved the ability to work with customers and help solve their challenge and problems using tools like Creo Parametric. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started into the webinar. Now, the first feature we'll highlight is the lattices for 3D printing. And so, as we all know, now 3D printing is almost like this new manufacturing wave or revolution that's sweeping, the industry. And with every, week that passes, you have some random new technology that can, build things even better. Well, what that means now is you can start to, build or design things that now can be manufactured by 3D printing, which prior to this could not be manufactured by any other manufacturing technique. So, for example, with the screenshots you have on screen, you can't, cast those, or you can't make those as weldments. The only way to create those now would be by 3D printing. And so, because the technology is there to enable it, now we're baking in that functionality into Creo 4 to allow people to create things like lattice structures. So that way you can create lightweight models, dramatically improve the strength to weight ratio of your models, also reduce the material cost of your 3D prints whenever you're building these, and yet still be able to create something that functionally satisfies your design requirements. Next improvement we'll highlight here is the 3D printing tray assembly. And in this particular case, what we have added is the ability to visualize your 3D print build tray inside of Creo Parametric, and then begin to position or place the different components or parts that you want to build inside of Creo. And the goal really for PTC is to get as close as possible to being a one-stop shop for everything 3D print related. So in other words, the goal is to eventually be able to manipulate everything 3D print wise from inside of Creo, so that way all you do is click one button and it starts manipulating your 3D printer. And so one of the steps to that is the tray assembly, where you can start to position the different components you want to build. And this user interface then also brings in many of the different tools many tools you need to help in the 3D print process. So you can start to do things like printability validation. You can clip your model, reposition your model. You can also scale up or down your model, all from the same user interface. The next big improvement is the advanced rendering functionality. And now, prior to this, the rendering was powered by a different engine that really didn't give you as much of a dynamic preview. You always had to click a preview or a render button and wait to see what the resulting output was. In this case, they replaced that with a new rendering engine powered by Keyshot. Now, for those of you that are familiar with the rendering world, Keyshot is one of the industry leaders when it comes to rendering and ray tracing. And so what this does is this dramatically improves the rendering functionality inside of Creo, to where you can now generate very realistic renders, having a real-time view that updates immediately, and hence it dramatically reduces your time to set up and actually create the render. All right, so some of the improvements when it comes to the drawing side of things are, first off, they've added the ability to, or they've improved the ability to embed images in drawings. And this is one that many people have requested, where I think prior to this it was dependent on Microsoft OLE functionality, and it didn't work all too well. Well, in this case, they've completely removed that dependency on OLE. Now it's much better, much more robust, and you can now embed things like reference charts or pictures for illustrations right inside of your Creo drawings. The next one they've also added here is the ability to replace a model in a drawing view with another related model. And so typically in this case, if you had, for example, models that are related, say by an interchange assembly or family table instances of each other, you can very quickly and simply swap one model that's shown in a drawing view for another. So say, for example, I could say, if instance A5 of my family table is being shown on my front view, and I want to replace that so that way instance A13 is showing, with one click I can do that. And the beautiful thing about this is it'll preserve my annotations, it'll preserve my drawing, my view settings as well. And so that then makes it, much easier to just go ahead and, reuse and replace views in the drawing. All right, so these next couple of slides will go over some general enhancements, and the first off is going to be a new selection paradigm. And so now they've completely gotten rid of the smart selection filter. So it's not, and that was one of the hurdles to using Creo, was you had to remember to select a part first, or select a feature, and then you select the geometry, and then you select the point. And it was just a whole nested process that you had to remember, and if you didn't remember, you spent some time clicking something wondering why it wasn't selecting what you wanted. Now in Creo, they've completely removed that, and or in Creo 4, they've completely removed that, and now it's directly geometry based, and so that makes your selection much easier, and you can now begin to perform actions immediately on what you have selected. Next is going to be a new mini toolbar, which basically pops up right by your mouse whenever you select something, and that gives direct command access to many of your frequently used commands right at your fingertips, literally. And so it's extremely easy to use, extremely easy to configure, and actually, after using Creo 4, I began to crave, that mini toolbar in many other applications, because it just brings a command right there to your fingertips, and you'll be able to see examples of that. Another enhancement is they've added a new Fullscreen Mode to Creo, and basically, some people ask, how is this different from just hitting maximize on my monitor, or I guess on my window? Yeah, this is very different from maximize. This will, basically do what it says, increase Creo to full screen mode, so that way you're maximizing your screen real estate. And then the other thing, when it comes to the way of user experience, more so around performance, is they've improved the Creo engine under the hood, so that way it responds better to your power options. So for example, if you wanted to save battery life, for example, and you changed your Windows power options to maximize battery performance, and then that will throttle down Creo's performance. So that way, again, your battery life lasts a lot longer. And whenever you switch that to max performance, that will increase Creo's performance as well. So that way, Creo will use all the juice it can from your computer, and enhance your maximizing your productivity. So again, whenever you switch to maximum performance in your Windows power options, that is directly improving the performance of Creo basically immediately. So, or Creo 4, I should say, immediately. The next enhancements are going to be over the customizations, and so this is something that's going to make the CAD admins really happy. One of the key things about customizations in prior versions was, especially in the Creo series, is that you had to make a change in part mode, and if you wanted the same change in all the different contexts, you would have to then go to assembly mode to make the change in the UI, and then drawing mode to make the change as well, and save all of those into one file. And it was just a whole jumbled mess that basically meant, many people did not customize their user interfaces, and for those that did, they were confused as to how to do it, or I guess confused along the way to doing that. And so what they've added is the ability to easily propagate, command changes from one context to another. So I no longer have to switch between the different contexts, but I can change it in one context, and it propagates through to everything immediately. And so that makes your customizations much easier. All right, so at this point, we will go ahead and pause right here and switch to the software demonstration. And again, as we mentioned earlier, this is going to be a recorded demonstration. And so we'll go ahead and play the video, and then we'll circle back at the end to field any questions or comments you have.
All right, so since we have a lot to show, let's dive straight into the demo right here. And so one of the first things you'll notice about Creo 4.0 is that first off, the user interface, looks and feels the same as Creo 3. And so obviously there are improvements. There are many different things that have been changed under the hood. But for the most part, the user interface looks and feels familiar to what you're already used to using. So that dramatically reduces the learning curve when it comes to a ramp-up time to get used to Creo 4. Now, one of the big changes that is highlighted in Creo 4 is the rendering application. And so before this, Creo was powered by a completely different rendering application that you basically had to enter your rendering settings or specify how you wanted your material or your lighting to be. And then you click on a button that says render, and then it'll go and magically render for a few minutes. And if you didn't like what it gave you, then you would have to go and manually, change it again, and then click on the render button again, and it will then re-render again for a few minutes, which basically was a very tedious process because you never knew what you were going to get until you clicked one button, waited for a few minutes to realize that's not what you wanted. In this case with Creo 4, what they've added is they've powered the advanced rendering under the hood with KeyShot. Now, KeyShot is an industry-leading rendering software powered by Luxion, or made by Luxion, that does real-time ray tracing. And so, in other words, as you are using or creating your render settings in real time, KeyShot is automatically refining the image to show you what the render is going to look like. And so there's no lag time, there's no waiting, there's no guesswork, there's no keeping your fingers crossed. KeyShot will show you the real model immediately. And so in order to get into that, first off, we'll show some of the new differences with Creo 4. One of the first things before we get into the rendering piece fully is this scene background. So scene background and ambient occlusion are two commands that were hidden in Creo 3, I guess you would say. They were not as visible, so people didn't use them as much, and so they just popped them out onto the in-graphics toolbar right here. Now, that particular command, so scene background, will show you the scene background as long as you have two things selected, as long as you have shading with reflections and also you have a perspective view. And so now in this case, it'll show you the background of your scene, and in this particular case, I believe this is in some sort of studio-like environment, right? And so we'll keep our scene background for now. One of the things we also then want to do in terms of continuing on to the rendering application is to really just pick on this rend applications right here, and now that's what your rendering application is going to be. And so there's no longer any render tab, you'll notice. Now it's going to be a button on your applications tab that will then power KeyShot. Now, one of the reasons why we turned on the environment beforehand is because KeyShot will use the environment HDRI to adequately capture the lighting, within the scene as well. And so you can see right here, the lighting is coming from the left side of the screen, and so you have the shadow of this armrest, on the seat right there, right? So we'll go ahead and pop a few materials on this and start to get this render up and going. So let's see. Let's go just find say just a typical steel, and I'm just going to use say this guy. Let's put him over there. And we'll just pick a couple more materials for the remaining components here. But one of the things you'll notice is as soon as I apply the materials on screen, immediately KeyShot starts to render based on what it has to realistically apply the lighting and the material on those materials to show what the reflections will look like, right? Okay, we'll go grab a couple more materials here. Go for a matte plastic this time. And just go that, and also the armrest that you use to raise or lower the chair. Right, and then finally we're going to say for the chair itself, let's probably go for leather. So going to go fabric, and we'll say brown leather should be good enough. And you'll notice it immediately, starts to update to show me what the real-time or what the final result is going to look like. Now, not only is this really powerful in terms of you being able to automatically apply your materials and then see what the resulting update is, but you can also then begin to make changes to your materials and watch them update as well in real time. Now, before I go ahead and show the changes, one of the other things I'll actually mention real quick here is that Creo 4 also comes with the added ability for a full screen mode. And so in order to maximize your screen real estate, if you press F11, Creo will go ahead and expand all the way out into full screen mode, and so that way you're utilizing every pixel that's available to you. And so I'll go ahead and toggle that just so that way I have my full rendering window, and then we'll go back and say let's go modify that that material. So we'll go ahead and say let's edit this right here. Now, one of the reasons why I'm editing this, you'll notice the leather on the seat looks pretty reflective, and last I checked, there is really no leather that's that reflective unless you polish it extremely well. And so we'll go ahead and bump down the glossiness, real low, so that way it reflects, real-world samples. And you'll notice with just one click, KeyShot automatically starts to update the real-time view to show you what the resulting render will look like. Yeah. Now, another thing that you can also do in this case would be to also change the scene as well. So you can have your render in many different scenes as you prefer. You could have it in an indoor scene like that, and all of that will then basically change the lighting all the way around, and how the light affects the model, and also then how you have, for example, ground effects or ground shadows affecting the model. Now, obviously, in this case, I didn't go ahead to apply materials on all the different components here to make a full-blown render. This is really just to show you the dramatically improved capabilities of rendering inside of Creo 4. Now, another thing I'll do real quick here is I'll also bump up the render performance. And so basically, KeyShot has some pretty good preset settings for renders. And so number one, that means that you don't have to be an expert in order to know how to use KeyShot renders. You don't have to go to photography school or whatever it is. You can just use the presets and you could still get very, very good, very decent renders. Now, while we're on the topic of our full screen mode over here, one of the feedback that we've heard so far with full screen mode is, what, it would be really nice and handy if we could see our message bar, so that way we can see what Creo is telling us as we're using tools. Well, you can easily do that by mousing over to the bottom over here, and it'll automatically pop out for you. If you always want to keep that up on screen, you can just right click and say pin status bar, and that'll pin that so that way it always remains there permanently. And as you've seen me do already, you can move all the way up to, activate your ribbon and have it pop out. Move to the left to activate your model tree. And so really, you still have, for full screen mode, all of the different things you need. Whenever you're controlling Creo, what makes it even better is you're maximizing your screen real estate to make sure that you have every pixel you need to do what you want to do in Creo. And so that bit goes into a couple of different improvements that they added in Creo 4. First is the rendering piece, and then next is the full screen element as well. So I highlighted both of those at the same time together. Next, we're going to go into looking at the lattice feature. All right. So we have this what's it called, caliper right here. Now the lattice feature is basically born out of the need to, or I guess you'd say the advancement so far in the additive manufacturing industry and the need to support that even more. As many of you know, additive manufacturing in the last few years has become a buzzword. It's one of the new growth frontiers in terms of industry and in terms of manufacturing technologies. More and more things are able to be manufactured using additive manufacturing even now. Now, one of the ways PTC decided to support that inside of Creo 4 is to add a new tool called the lattice feature. Now, what does that mean? Well, that typically means that in this case now you can fill in any solid feature with a network of lattice structures. And so we'll go ahead and activate that right here. And typically it wants you to select a closed volume, or in this case I'll just shell my part over here. And say for example we'll exclude this surface just so that way we can see what's going on the inside. And now when it comes to the cell, you have a whole bunch of different options, but for example this is a typical example of a cell that you can create. And you can configure this as much as you like. You can add inner horizontal or vertical beams. You can vary the dimensions, the X, Y, and Z dimensions of that cell. And now in this particular case, this is a full 3D cell, and so whenever we go ahead and hit the check mark to say OK, Creo is then going to automatically build that as a lattice into my my part over here like that. Now, not only does it do this for, in this particular case, 3D cells, but you also have many other options to choose from. You also have 2.5D cells as well, and in this case you have everything from a square to a hexagon, for example. And we'll go ahead and, I don't know, just bump this down a little bit. And we'll say OK. And now what we have inside of our model is something that looks like a honeycomb structure, right? And so there are many different lattice structure types to play with. Everything from if I go back to a 3D over here, everything from a hexagonal to, and let's take a look at that. Yeah, everything from a hexagonal to triangular cell, a whole bunch of different options that you can play with, and all of those then mean that that you can flexibly organize and create effective lattices to support weight inside of your components. Part of the other benefit to this is that you can either show this as a full BREP geometry, or you can also show this as a simplified geometry as well. Now that simplified geometry will export to Creo Simulate. So if I go ahead and Show this right here. All right. So this simplified geometry right now shows up as just lines. But if I then go ahead and go into Creo Simulate, what you'll notice is all of those lines now become beams inside of Creo Simulate. Now beams are FEA elements that Creo Simulate understands. I can go ahead and apply a force and a constraint to this particular model right now, run an analysis, and it'll analyze based on my lattice structure that I have. And so the benefit to this isn't the case where you're creating a lattice and hoping that the rest of the weight can support the load you have on the part. In this case, you can partner with Creo Simulate to analyze the model and see if it is strong enough or if you need to increase your lattice density. And not only can you also do that as well, but Creo Simulate can also run optimizations on your lattice structure as well. So you can begin to give Creo Simulate your lattice parameters like the size of your lattice cell, and also the thickness of the lattice walls, and Creo will then change those, or Simulate will change those in order to achieve a certain simulation objective using the optimization algorithm. Again, all of this making sure that you can effectively accommodate a lattice in your part, and again still have it not dramatically reduce its strength characteristics. So we'll close out of Simulate here, and I'll make one last edit to my lattice tool. Go ahead and do that. All right, so I'll take it out and just create it like this, where the lattice is inside or inside of the model. The next feature, or I guess the next highlight or enhancement I'm going to show, is the 3D printing arrangement tray. Now, in order to also facilitate with 3D printing as well, a lot of times, currently the way it's done, many CAD packages, whenever you have a design to go to a 3D printer, really most CAD packages will stop where they finish creating the 3D model, and then you would have to create a step file and do a lot of setup work on the printer end, setting up the part on the tray, checking for printability, and all these different other things. All of that you can now do from the interface of the additive manufacturing subtype of a manufacturing file. And so in this particular case, we'll go ahead and create one. And what happens is Creo will pull out basically the build tray of your 3D printer, and again you can customize this to fit your 3D printer. And you can then go ahead and bring in whatever parts you want to build. You can bring in as many as you prefer. In this case, we'll go ahead and bring in that one. And really, I'll just place it right there. The goal is not to constrain it down or to fix it in a particular location. The goal is just to place as many as I want in there. And now I can have Creo automatically position my component to fit the best possible location. Not only can you have that, but in the case where you have many different components, you can also have Creo nest them, so that way it automatically positions them, so that way they maximize the tray volume, right? And now, in the aim of taking this to a 3D printer, you now have many other tools that are necessary for the task right at your fingertips. So things, for example, like being able to scale your models, so maybe scaling it up or down depending on if it's too big or too small for your build tray. I'll automatically position this again. Yep. You'd also have, for example, being able to, take any measurements if you'd prefer, or also do some printability validation. So anything, for example, like checking for, thin walls based on your printer minimum wall thickness, or searching for narrow gaps as well. All of this you can do very easily and have it analyze the geometry real time. And then finally, we'll go ahead and preview the 3D print build over here, and you can then also not only preview it this way, but you can also show a clipping to sort of get an idea of how your 3D print will progress as it starts off. And so, as your printer starts creating your model slice by slice, you can get an idea of how your model is going to be created. And so, if there are any, poor geometry or undercuts or any other areas where you feel like you want to go modify, you can very clearly see those, and then go modify those, so that way they don't become, problems on the printing side of things, right? And in the case where you want to generate an STL, right here is the command to tessellate the model, and you could send that STL to a 3D printer. And so really, inside of Creo 4, what they've done and what PTC, the trend we see them going is to basically bridge that gap between your CAD design and your finished 3D printed product. In fact, with Creo 4, PTC has a partnership with Stratasys, which is the world's largest 3D printing company, to connect Creo 4 with many of Stratasys printers out of the box. And so what that then means is, in the same way you have, say a Word document, and you push Control P in Microsoft Word, and you magically see a piece of paper spool into your printer and come out with ink. In that same way, the eventual goal for Creo is to have you create your 3D model, click a magical button called Print, and all of a sudden you see your Stratasys printer head moving because it's starting to print what you just clicked on, right? And so again, that bridges the gap between your CAD model and your finished 3D printed model. And right now, not many CAD packages are seeking to bridge that gap, and so PTC is really doing a great job. All right. So next in the lineup of feature of enhancements to talk about is the new selection paradigm. And so first off, one of the things you'll notice is the smart selection filter is completely gone. It no longer exists anymore. Smart is dead. And we believe that's from users complaining really about how clunky it is to use. And so really with this now, whenever you select, the default is to select geometry immediately. And one of the things you'll notice is that as you begin to select the items, the model tree will automatically expand to highlight that particular item for you, even if it's in a subassembly of a subassembly, somewhere inside of another part. Whatever item you click on, it automatically will expand to show you where that is, right? Now, not only that, but in this case now, so I can very easily select on whatever surfaces I want or whatever edges I want to query select directly, very easily. I no longer have to pick my feature first or pick my part and then have to pick the surface or the edge underneath that. Now, another nice enhancement that they've added to Creo 4 is the mini toolbar right up here. And now this mini toolbar basically brings commands right to your fingertips, so that way instead of you having to navigate all the way up to the ribbon to access frequently used commands, you have access to them right here from your mini toolbar. So one of the easy. So one of the things you can do is to say, just for example, let's hide that component, or let's pick on this guy and say let's zoom to selected, and in that case it actually zooms to the tiny edge over there. But you basically get the point. You can easily select commands right off of your mini toolbar and become more productive basically. Now the mini toolbar basically works this way. In this bottom section here, it basically deals with visibility. So hiding or view normal, for example. This next row of icons here is the selection context. So in other words, the commands it gives you in that second row are primarily based on on what you have selected, the object you have selected. So in this case, I have a surface selected, and so it's giving me options, for example, to create a sketch or to create a hole on that surface. Right? And then in the broader or the extended selection context, that gives me commands for modifying the entire object that my selection entity is part of. So in this case, I could edit definition and edit the placement of that model. I could activate that part model or open the part model, in this case of an assembly. Or I can go over here to select from parents, and I can begin to see what the hierarchy is, and I could select the part if I want to select the part, or I could select any other item in between, say sub-assemblies or even the full assembly as well. And so if I wanted to get direct access to open this part, it's as simple as picking on that button and yep, right in here. And so the fact that they've gotten rid of the smart selection filter, but yet added an extended selection context, means that you really don't lose any productivity, because you can still select on whatever you want, and you have the flexibility of creating or performing feature or part level operations or commands that you typically would have done if you were selecting the entire feature or part model. Alright, so next item to show over here is going to be in Sketcher. So we'll go ahead and pick on this guy and open him up. And yeah, and so now in Sketcher there are a few different enhancements. One of the ones I like to talk about, actually, because it lends itself really well to this particular model before I get into Sketcher, is the mid-plane enhancement. So in other words, what PTC has added is the ability to say, whenever you're creating a datum plane, you can basically pick on, for example, two planar surfaces and have it create a plane right down the middle of those surfaces. Right. And so again, this just makes it much easier to work with. But now we'll go ahead here and say, okay, let's get into our sketch, and now let's go ahead and I don't know, we'll import a shape from our palette over here. Alright, so one of the things I was going to mention or talk about is the fact that right from here within Sketcher, you'll notice how my sketch plane has some overhanging geometry over it, or I guess some model geometry that's on top of it over here. Now they've added this option here to clip the model by the sketch plane, so that way you can temporarily get rid of that, and you can have a much more easier sketch plane to work with. And now I'll then go ahead and also add that datum plane over here, and Yep, and we can do that. Now, the other thing you'll notice about Sketcher is that the constraints are now created in sort of a small green background behind them, which basically means they're much more visible, and so they're less likely to hide, and it's less likely that you're inadvertently constraining something that you didn't intend to constrain when you're sketching. Your Sketcher entities are now much more visible for you. Now, not only do we have that, but we also have some other improvements in terms of extrudes as well. So if I go ahead and say let's create an extrude over here, one of the things you'll notice from Sketcher is that you no longer have to go and pick references for existing model edges. You can just start sketching and Creo will automatically pick and select those entities as references. Right? And now if we say we want to go ahead and extrude this sketch, there are now a few other options that they've added to this here, basically making it much easier to use. So first off, for example, is the fact that you now have easier access to the side 2 extrude right from your right-click menu, and so you can easily define an extrude in both directions. Your side 2 depth now has a negative depth to it, and so that way you can add a negative depth to your side 2 like that. Or in this case, we'll just go ahead and clear that. And then the other thing you can do with this now is whenever you have what's it called, an extrude through to a selected surface, not only can you have that, but you can also have it intersect with a offset of that particular surface. And so now, as I offset that surface, my extrude endpoint basically increases or decreases. All right. Now this in particular doesn't represent any real life feature. I just did that to show what the new improvement is in extrudes. Now next up is going to be the UI or the customizations. And so one of the things you'll notice, for example, is whenever I pick on a particular entity and I have my mini toolbar show up, one of the things people typically ask is, okay, well, how do I customize that, right? Because I want to add a few more commands that are not there. Well, it's as simple as right-clicking over here and telling Creo, hey, I want to add something else to this. And you can specify this and say, for example, let me look for my measure tool, and I want to drag that and add it on right over here. And now all of a sudden, with whatever you select, you have your measure tool right there to, in any context you have. And so it's very easy to customize from a user perspective. Now, from an admin perspective as well, customizing the Creo ribbon is also one that's been drastically improved as well. For any admins that have tried to customize the ribbons in Creo 1 to 3, basically any customizations you make in one mode don't carry over to any other mode, and you have to go recreate the customization. So if you add a new command in or a new tab in part mode, you have to go add it in drawing mode, you have to go add it in assembly mode as well. Well, in this case, you can now handle all of that with basically the click of a button. So if we go ahead here and tell Creo we want to customize the ribbon, first off, we can show all the different commands and all the different tabs from either the current mode we're in, so in this case assembly mode, or the popular mode, so assembly, drawing, layout, and a couple others, or you can show all modes and it'll pull everything out. So we'll flip back to popular modes here, and let's say we want to look at a view tab in assembly. and a View tab also in Design Part Mode. And let's look at visibility. Yeah, okay. And now if I pick on the layers over here in assembly, and I say, you know what, let's get rid of that, you'll notice it automatically gets rid of it over in part mode visibility as well. Now the reason for that, or what controls that, is what's called propagation. So if I right click over here, any group or any tab that has the same name across any of the different contexts or modes will have the same customization propagated through to it, as long as that propagation checkbox is selected. Now on the flip side, if we want to disable propagation and we say let's remove that checkbox, now if I pick on this hide command over here in part mode, I can remove that, but hide is still visible in my assembly mode. Right.
Things, that was basically all we had planned to show today. And so we'll go ahead and start fielding some questions. And so once again, if you have any other questions, you can in the GoToWebinar section in the questions panel in the GoToWebinar pane, and I'll go ahead and answer those. And seems that we're already about 4 minutes from time. I'm just going to go ahead and pick on 1 or 2 questions here, and then I'll go ahead and call it a day, and then we'll also go ahead and send a follow-up email out to everyone as well. Okay, so first off is a couple of people mentioned that there was some lag in the video, and this is something that we also understand from our end as well. So more than likely what we'll do is we'll try and fix the recording before we send it out or before we make it public, so that way the recorded video does not have the lag in it, and that's what we'll try and post out. But yes, we do realize that there was a lag there, and we do apologize for that. Yeah, we do apologize for that. Next is a question was asked, when manufacturing for 3D printing, what format is used, and can you seamlessly print with non-Stratasys printers? So right now, the format the default format that's being used is an STL format. I know there's currently discussions on creating a new 3D print format called an AMF file, which PTC is on the consortium that's developing that. So the AMF standards have not yet been fully finalized, I believe, and so once that's all been fully done, that will be baked into Creo as well. But right now, it's using an STL, and the question was asked, can you also seamlessly print with non-Stratasys printers? And for that, right now, it's no. So basically, the Stratasys printer and Creo 3 and also 4, currently, what you can do is you can connect the printer to your Creo installation. So that way you click print, and then it passes the information straight to the printer without the need for Object Studio typically in the middle. In the case of non-Stratasys printers, you can still do many 3D print items inside of Creo. You can still check for printability validation. You can still, position items. You can still test your models. You can still do many things that you would do if you were printing to a Stratasys printer. The only thing you would not be able to do is to click print and then have your printer start to operate since it's non-Stratasys. So what would then happen is you would eventually create an STL file at the end of all of that, and then load that STL file to your printer and have it go. Another question was asked, So talking about the selection filter, and the question was, can you turn smart selection back on, or because you've spent many years using what to call smart selection, and you're used to that. Now, this would be one to, I would say, not to quote me on, but typically there more than likely will be a config.pro option to turn smart selection on or off. Again, not to quote me on that, but usually that's the way PTC introduces changes, is to bring a config.pro option to make it changeable, so that way people that prefer the old method can still use that as well. And the other thing you also mentioned here is that you typically want to, select the part and then adjust the part's location. And that you can also do currently using the geometry selection and the mini toolbar, because the mini toolbar opens up, and within the extended selection context, it will bring out commands for you to manipulate the part itself. So you can easily edit the definition of the part by selecting any geometry on that part as well. All right. All right, so that's it for now. We're going to call it a day right now. If you have any other questions or comments, you can by means shoot me an email, or also if you want to email any sales questions regarding pricing, you can do that as well. My email address, is on the GoToWebinar control panel. You can just right-click and hit copy on that, and you'll be able to see my email and contact us with that. Thank you so much for jumping on this webinar. We realize it's just over an hour right now. We want to keep to time and respect your time, and so we'll call it a day right here. Once again, we apologize for the recording. We'll go ahead and see how to fix that before we send it out. And thank you so much for attending this webinar. Thank you. Bye.